Alright guys, I want to talk about some Seiko Kinetics. My good friend Michael sent over a couple of his BFKs, or big freaking kinetics. And I mean, they are kind of big and chunky feeling, but in the world of dive watches, especially Seikos, I don't think they're massive. Like, I don't know if they necessarily deserve the name BFK, but it's cool. I mean, I guess it's still a cool nickname. Size-wise, let's talk about that real quick, and then we'll get into some other thoughts on this guy. I measure from like here to here, about 43.2, just under 50 mil lug to lug. You're looking at about 49.8. Thickness is a beefy 14.5. And lug width here, if you can get it, it's like 20 mil. But you know, these are going to be bolted in. You're not going to want to take it off the bracelet. The bracelets are actually a really good feature of this watch, so you're going to want to leave it like that. But it does taper down to about 19-ish, slight taper from the lug width. You know, this part here is obviously wider. This is probably closer to 23 or something, but pretty hefty watch. But before we talk about the looks of that one, and I'm actually wearing a yellow one, which is super cool, I want to talk about thinking outside the box. Now, of course, there's already some kinetic fans because they understand the value in the watch, in the way it uses mechanical and a capacitor to give a, you know, an automatic, basically, power of a, you know, it's not a battery, it's a capacitor. It's basically a battery of sorts that powers a quartz crystal, and these things are super accurate. If you look at some people online, these things are getting like really good reviews as far as accuracy. So I don't know what the actual plus or minus is on these. I'm sure there is some deviation allowed, but most people are reporting that they're like crazy accurate. So, and you can see the ticks actually hit the hash marks really good. Everything is really good quality on these watches too. So I guess that's my point with this whole topic. If you are not, or you have not looked at the kinetics, but you're looking for some good, awesome Seiko divers at like really good value propositions, these things can be had easily under $300, and there's a bunch of different colorways. In some cases, you might find one that's a little beat up, maybe even needs a capacitor or something, and you're willing to take a risk and maybe learn your watch a little bit. You might even be able to score one around $100. But in good working condition like this, I think you're going to probably be just, you know, 200, just north of 200 on these used. And I have not handled, there's another watch that I want to see at some point. It's called a Seiko Spork, I think is the nickname. I forget the actual number of it, but this case kind of reminds me of it. That one is an automatic, and the crown is at, you know, offset here around the 4 o'clock. This one, to me, I think a lot of the case design, the way it's rounded and everything and bolted in and heavy duty and robust feeling, reminds me of that model. And I dig that. Like on wrist, these things are so good feeling because there's no sharp edges, but then it also has that beefy, strong look to it on top of it being soft and rounded everywhere. It's a weird combination, but it's really good on wrist. The bezel action on this is 120 click, and literally, I've not seen a ton of kinetics, but everyone that I've seen come through here, the bezel action is the best bezel action I've seen on Seiko divers. So, and the bracelets are really good. I mean, it's using the stamped clasp, but the rest of the bracelet, it's actually thick and very comfortable feeling as well. So, Caseback is very much like an SKX. You can see there, probably identical. Could be wrong on that, but I suspect I'm right. The handset is pretty cool. It's skeletonized, and then it also has quite a bit of loom out on the outside there. Really nice dial. This yellow is just spectacular. And then, of course, this all black Coke bezel one is pretty slick too, with a dash of yellow on the seconds hand. And you can see it just hits the marks perfect. So screw down crown, 200 water resist. I mean, just, and really, guys, the Bezel Action alone is worth getting one of these just to check out. And they wear so good. So if you're willing to step outside the norm, while everyone else is hunting down monsters and turtles and samurais and mod watches and all the other things, you know, maybe go down a path where no one else is looking. And that's where the really sweet deals are. So I have a book here. So the way these work is there's a you charge them up, like when you wear it, it charges it. There's a rotor inside, okay, and it charges the capacitor, mechanical charging, electrical. So but you can also check it with this crown up here at the 2 o'clock. You can check how much life is in that capacitor. Now Michael just changed out both of these capacitors, and the capacitors are not very expensive. It's a little tricky to do, but I think after you do it. So, okay, real quick though, when you get the second hand up at the 12 o'clock, you push the button there and it rotates around and you can see it hit the 20-second mark. So you have 1 month power reserve on this thing right now. So that's almost maxed. The next spot, like if you were to wear this or charge it, then you would have, 4 to 6 months power reserve on these. So they're pretty slick. Like you could, if you get them charged up, or maybe you just have one and you wear it on a regular basis. I know you have to wear it a lot to get it charged mechanically, but there's ways to charge it. I'll put a link in the description. I found a video on YouTube of a guy that took a, your powered toothbrush charging bases that you just set your brush on, and it charges through through the plastic of it. He put a little foam pad on there and he sets his watch right on it, and it actually charges it through. It charges the cell through there. And there's a bunch of people in the comments on that video that said it totally works. So I don't know, that might be worth a shot. You could probably pick up one of those charging base stations for one of those for dirt cheap, or maybe even have one laying around that you're trying to throw away soon. Or Seiko actually makes a charging station for these. You can find them on the forums or on eBay. I think there's one even on there, but they're like $300. So I know a lot of people don't want to invest more than they actually bought the watch for into a charging station, and I get it. But I think just wearing it, if you have a fresh capacitor in there and just wearing it, or maybe doing some wizardry with a toothbrush charger or something like that, I think would be totally fine. Definitely something to consider, guys. There's different colorways. I'm digging these two. I understand why Michael bought them, because the yellow is hot, and then that all black with the Coke bezel is pretty sweet too. And then you even have a little splash of color there in the crown. So I'm going to close you guys out with a Loom Shot on these guys, because again, it is a Seiko, so the loom is going to be awesome. So there you go. Pretty slick with those skeletonized hands. So you have the loom all the way out. You can see on the hour hand there, it's just a ball floating out there in the middle of nowhere. And then the minute hand, you have like an arrow. And of course, you have a little bit on the seconds hand. So very cool watches indeed. Big thanks to Michael for lending those in. And let me know what you guys think about the Kinetics. I think they're pretty slick.